Ibrahim Traore is being celebrated across the continent as a symbol of African sovereignty. But right now, his government is fighting on more than one front that most people aren't even talking about. There's the Jihadist insurgency in the north and a growing confrontation with its own country's Muslim scholars and Imams over a new secular law. Now, you have to put in that hat also France. France is struggling to find itself back in the driver's seat of Burkina Faso, where it can continue to pillage the resources for its own sake. Then you have what is now coming to be more apparent, Western media starting to attack Ibrahim Traore as though he's done nothing great or spectacular for the Burkina Bay people. Throw into that pile also in terms of media, Al Jazeera just recently did a piece on Ibrahim Traore, and they took digs at him. These media stronghouses are making it as though he's accomplished absolutely nothing in the country since his arrival to power. The only way to contest all those accusations is to look at what's developing, what has been developed as well in Burkina Faso. They now have road infrastructure. They now have manufacturing plants, processing plants. They now mine their own resources. They're into agriculture in any respect. They grow fruits, vegetables. They even grow cotton. They raise cattle now. Burkina Faso exports to 1.5 billion Africans on the continent. They're open for business. Now, this in and of itself is a phenomenon. It hasn't been done. No one else has done it. Now that he's doing it, they are seeking ways to discredit everything that he and the Burkina Bay people have established and accomplished. So that's what he's up against. Now, our question or our thought is, can a sovereign movement survive a fight on multiple fronts at once like this? Is that even sustainable? Most would say no, it's not. In fact, most told Ibrahim Traore and his government that their ideas were impossible. They would not be able to accomplish any of them. Here they are, 4 years later, doing way more for themselves than any colonizer ever has. So I think that's just something they would say in order to discourage a leader such as himself as much as the Burkina Bay people. And that would go for Mali and Niger as well. But listen, let's start with this image, all right? The world sees this guy, and what they see for the most part is a black man in fatigues with a beret on. You know, what does that say? This is a military guy. He's a part of a junta. Can't be trusted. You know, they're just strong men. You know, they have no ideas. They don't have ideologies that serve the people, that the people could get a hold of, latch on to, and as a unit, you know, develop something, create something from it or from that ideal. They're wrong. This is the image the world sees. This is the image the world sees of this guy. Traore has become one of the most recognized faces of the African sovereignty movement, okay? He expelled French troops and other Western troops, whether they mention it or not. He has turned toward Russia for security partnerships. As a result, he has built a viable army, tanks, helicopters, planes, munitions, guns, you name it, they just about have it. In fact, the only thing they haven't brought to the table yet, but they're working on it, is a nuclear power plant, something that most analysts and people on our side agree they'll have in the next 2 years. That is a great accomplishment. He's brought his people together. That is an even greater accomplishment. So these are the things that are happening, and not only did he, get with Russia and create a security partnership, he also made economic self-reliance the centerpiece of his message and for the people. You guys can get in here. I'm saying to you guys, this is what we can do. And they trust him because they're out there every day putting in the work. Again, it's so noticeable. It's more noticeable and it speaks volumes. It speaks louder than any hack job or hack piece produced by the BBC and or Al Jazeera or any other for that matter. Now that's the part of history, or that's the part of the story most of you already know. And for those of you who don't, there it is. There it is. But listen, there's a harder reality underneath that image of Ibrahim, all right? Burkina Faso is still in the middle of a serious security crisis, all right? Armed groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, JNIM affiliates to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, are always in the fields trying to expand their base of attacks, their terrorism through parts or in parts of the country for years. And again, it seems to have escalated somewhat. Now, couple that escalation with the fact that, hey, you have France supporting these terrorists. That's, okay, allegedly. Supporting logistics, supporting money, and supporting weapons, all in a bid to overthrow the Ibrahim Traore transitional government in Burkina Faso. The plan here is to stop this progress. With this progress, then, hey, France has no excuse or has no reason to be in Burkina Faso, Mali, and or Niger. That's the issue here. That's the issue here. And this is what he's accomplished. So far, so good. Most of us have to admit to that. But again, you have these people there. They're there to destabilize what he's built for the Burkina Bay people, right? That's what that's about. And again, these new fronts that are springing up, again, for a lot of the Islamic scholars, the Imams, they're threatening Traore'S leadership role. There's a lot of criticism coming from a lot of these so-called Imams. But what I guess it could be said, what they didn't expect was for the people, other Muslims, because again, take this in consideration. Ibrahim Traore is a Muslim. But what they didn't gamble on or what they didn't bet on was the support he would receive from other Muslims, not just in Africa or Burkina Faso, but all over the world. The support is real. The support is real. So this has been a drawback, or they are receiving a lot of blowback for their criticism of Ibrahim based upon their ideology, and that would be Sharia law being established rather than secular law, which is in place. They want to overturn that. That is the issue with these imams and these jihadists. Now, and again, we have France. Of course, France is going to do everything that it can to overthrow, topple Ibrahim Traore. And you have to look at it like this. If that's done, to some degree, they will destroy most of what he built. Only thing that they would probably keep is that which would help them to make more money. If you have a gold processing plant in Burkina Faso, they probably wouldn't use that. Think about it. And if they did, they would cheat the Burkina Bay people out of that proceed. So it's always been in their interest to take the gold, the raw resources, send them back to France, process it there, bring it back to Burkina Faso and other African nations and sell it at a higher price. They would more than likely pillage the farmlands, all this produce and agriculture they've established. They would either destroy it or claim ownership of it. That's how we see that. But, you know, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. Then there's, you know, again, there are other fronts at play here. There are other fronts. Now, this is kind of related to the Islamic issue. You had maybe 800 Burkina Bay youth go to Saudi Arabia to practice, well, they're there practicing Sharia law. And Ibrahim has said flat out, that makes no sense. Why would you go to Saudi Arabia to learn Sharia law when we need engineers? We need builders. We need visionaries to build our country up. So for all of you who are there, don't come back to Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso don't need you. We don't need more imams or people pushing Sharia law in a secular country, or a country that's ran or is conducted based upon secular governments. It looks out for all the people, not just Muslims. So that's another thing that's coming. Well, it's not biting him in the butt, so to speak, but it's an issue. It's created a little blowback. But again, that blowback is coming from these Muslim scholars, those who really want, in their minds, really need Sharia law to be established over secular law. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that an issue? All right. But that's that front that's forming. One that's just, again, just starting to get real coverage. If you pay attention, you'll see it more and more. You'll hear about it more and more. It's actually happening. But Burkina Faso's transitional government passed that religious freedom law. This was back in June that started all this stuff with the Muslims to begin with. All right. That law was meant to reinforce the country's secular constitution. And not only that, also, he done away with democracy and political organizations or political affiliations and groups. So, you know, here in America, the United States, they have Republicans, Democrats, Independent. He said, well, now we're not doing any of that. We're not doing any of that. In fact, there's no political apparatus. You know, there's no democracy in Burkina Faso. And they literally done away with it. And that was another issue with the West. France was at one point talking to the United Nations, saying, we got to go in there because this is a threat to national security, to our national interest. Wow, imagine that. And this is, again, a sovereign nation that is being told or dictated to do what someone else wants them to do other than what they want to do or what's best for them in their country. So there was that. Yeah, he passed that freedom, that religious freedom law back in June. And it was meant, again, to reinforce the country's secular constitution. But since then, Traore has taken a hard stance. He said publicly that Sharia law will never be implemented. He's warned that imams preaching extremism will be suspended, and he's moving to we call Burkina Bay students, which is what I was talking about, studying in Saudi Arabia, Islamic law abroad or whatever. He's telling them, hey, come back. I think just recently, in fact, he said, no, you stay. We don't need you. That had to be a blow. That had to be a blow. But some prominent religious figures have already been arrested as a result of these new laws he's putting into place. One in particular, his name was Imam Kindu. When it arrested him, shut his mosque down, everything. Say, hey, man, I'm not playing with you. This is for the people of Burkina, you know, the Burkina Bay people. This is not for nothing or no one else. This is for us. You know, we are Black, we're African. And he's saying that like, this is first. You got to love it. That you have to love it. He's been doing everything the West hates. He's been doing everything that, for those who say we're friends, should have been doing to help Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger grow and become productive countries within the continent of Africa, a continent. In fact, most of us relate to as poor, you know? But now, that being said, here's a tension though that's worth sitting with. If you really think about it, some of these same religious scholars have supported, or they did support, Traore'S government after that 2022 coup, right? These same individuals. However, that relationship is now strained. So these same individuals are in their own way threatening Traore. They're threatening him. So the question becomes, is this a necessary stand for a secular or sovereign state? Or is it a moment when unity matters most? Think about that. And, you know, we can't leave out France. Again, when we're talking about all this, we have to see the forest for the trees. France has a hand, or France stands to benefit from or by Captain Ibrahim Traore's removal. France stands to benefit by destabilizing and or dismantling everything that he has constructed thus far. Because you got to think about it. If, say, something happens to Traore, again, it doesn't benefit France for that to keep functioning. That's taking money for their coffers. That money, they would immediately think that we need that money in our coffers, in our banks. We're not going to put any more money in building infrastructure, colleges, hospitals, roads. They're not going to look at it like that. They wouldn't look at it like that. That would hurt their bottom line. The IMF never did it, never gave them money or allowed them to take money and build roads. The World Bank wouldn't do it. France wouldn't even do it. They needed them to be in this position of this disadvantage where they had nothing, and because of that, they could do nothing. And this is why we see most of these African nations and countries on the continent looking the way that they do, because those colonizers have deemed it so. It's beneficial to them. So even after being pushed out militarily, the West, particularly France and the United States, hasn't fully let go of influence in the region, all right, especially in the Sahel. There's been ongoing diplomatic and economic maneuvering to regain footing in the region, even as Traore's government leans further towards Russia and regional self-reliance through the AES. And again, France is not giving up. The United States is not giving up. This is a feather in their cap. In fact, this is trillions of dollars in their coffers, in their banks. Why would anyone think that they would just readily, just give it away? They wouldn't. In fact, they'll fight for it, although it's not theirs. And so you see that fight occurring as proxies through these jihadists, through these terrorists that do these sneak attacks. They'll attack in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger and run to Ghana or somewhere and hide. This is what they do. But they are being supported logistically, monetarily, and militarily. They're given maps and directions where to hit, how to hit. They're given money to pay these mercenaries who claim to be jihadists from all over the world. And they're given military equipment and weapons. That's France fighting a proxy war. That's the United States fighting a proxy war to get rid of someone who they deem an enemy. That's the face of Ibrahim Traore. This is what he's doing. So here's what I would like to I want you to think about, people. Can a transitional military government hold sovereignty, security, and deal with internal unity all at once. Can this be done? I like to think that again. I can say, just right now, it's being done. It's in real time happening. And I neglected to mention, there is also talk of internal issues. So in other words, it's as though Ibrahim is finding out some people are being turned. They're being approached. Some are agreeing to work with the enemy, and some are reporting back to him and say, this is what, was brought to my doorstep, So there is that other front that could very well be in the making, and that's an internal issue. So he has to be careful, because if you recall, Sankara was taken out by his best friend to help the French, to get power help the French. Hey, we'll let you be president. Just get him out of there. And when that happened, the French went in there, man, and they pillaged that gold and any other resource they had an appetite for. So this is what he needs to be mindful of, all right? He should be mindful of this. So again, my question to you guys, can a transitional military government hold sovereignty, security, and internal unity all at once? Or does defending one front always means weakening another? I like you guys go in the comments, please. Let me know what you think about that. There's this last question I want to ask you guys, and then I'll leave it alone. So here it goes. Is Traore'S government strong enough to fight insurgents? Strong enough to manage internal religious tension, and strong enough to keep the West at arm's length, all at the same time? Drop your take below. Let us know what you think about that. There's a lot on this plate. We wish nothing but success for the Burkina Bay people and their leader, as well as Mali and Niger. We wish nothing but the best for them. All right. Let us know what you think in the comments. We await, you guys' thought processes and opinions. Anything less than that, we had to come in and twist your arm. But this is TAP. You have been tuned in to the Art of Political Discourse. Please like, share, follow, subscribe to TAPT. Have a great day.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't